The massive crystal hall stretched high above Admiral Jake Morrison's head. The walls sparkled with strange blue light that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. He had been in this place many times before, but it still made him feel small. The Galactic Council chamber was built to remind visitors that they were just one tiny part of something much bigger. Jake stood straight in his dark blue uniform. His gray hair was cut short, and his face showed the lines of a man who had seen too much. Behind him stood Captain Lisa Martinez, a young woman with sharp eyes who carried a tablet full of reports that nobody wanted to hear. Around them, the council members sat on platforms that floated in the air. Each alien species had their own section, arranged in a perfect circle around the center where humans always had to stand. The Zephyrians looked like living glass, their bodies see-through and constantly shifting colors. The Kronans were huge and covered in thick armor that looked like stone. The Etherians floated like ghosts, barely solid enough to see. High Counselor Vexthara spoke first. Her voice came from her crystal body like wind through a cave. Admiral Morrison, you have requested this meeting to discuss military matters. Again, Jake nodded. Yes, Counselor. Earth's Defense Department has completed new threat assessments. We believe the galaxy needs stronger defensive preparations. A sound like breaking glass filled the chamber. It took Jake a moment to realize the Zephyrians were laughing. Their crystal bodies chimed and rang as they shook with amusement. Humans and their war games, said Counselor Zalaneth, his ghostly form flickering with what might have been a smile. 300 years of peace, and still you speak of threats that do not exist. Captain Martinez stepped forward. Counselor, with respect, peace doesn't mean threats have disappeared. It just means we haven't seen them yet. Commander Thulver. The massive Kronan representative made a sound like boulders rolling down a mountain. Jake realized this was also laughter. Little humans, you have been part of our coalition for only 50 years. We have known peace for 1,000. Your species still thinks like the primitive warriors you once were. Jake felt his jaw tighten. But he kept his voice calm. Commander, we're not asking the coalition to prepare for war. We're asking you to prepare for defense. There's a difference. Is there? Asked Vexthara. You build weapons, you train soldiers, you run battle simulations. How is this different from preparing for war? Because, Jake said slowly, being ready for war is how you avoid having one. The council chamber filled with more sounds of alien laughter. Some of the species made clicking noises. Others hummed in frequencies that made Jake's teeth ache. A few just stared at him with what he could only guess was pity. Lisa Martinez opened her tablet and held it up. We've prepared a presentation showing potential threat scenarios, statistical models based on galactic history, resource distribution, patterns, and the likelihood of unknown hostile species. Unknown hostile species? Thulver's voice boomed through the chamber. Child, we have mapped every system within 500 light years. We have treaties with every spacefaring civilization. There are no unknown hostile species. Know of, Jake said quietly. That we know of? Repeated Counselor Crimter, a thin creature with 4 arms and skin like tree bark. Humans always assume the worst. This is why your species took so long to achieve peace on your own world. Jake remembered the files he had studied about Earth's history. Wars, conflicts, centuries of fighting before humanity finally learned to work together. The other species saw this as proof that humans were naturally violent and primitive. Our history of conflict taught us valuable lessons, Jake said. One of them is that peace is fragile. Another is that someone always needs to be ready to protect it. Protect it from what? Vexthara's crystal form flashed brighter. Admiral Morrison, look around you. The Zephyrians create art that exists in 7 dimensions. The Etherians have learned to communicate through pure thought. The Kronans have built cities that float in space without any support structures. We have moved beyond the need for violence. But not beyond the need for protection, Lisa said. Art and cities and thought communication won't stop someone who wants to destroy them. Who? Thulver leaned forward on his floating platform. Who would want to destroy them? Every species in this galaxy has found their place in the coalition. We trade, we share knowledge, we create beauty together. War is obsolete. Jake looked around the chamber at the alien faces staring down at him. Some showed amusement, others showed pity, but none showed understanding. He had given this same speech dozens of times. Each time the result was the same. Counselors, he said, I'm not suggesting we start conflicts. I'm suggesting we prepare for the possibility that conflict might find us. Every species here has militaries, but they're ceremonial, parade units, honor guards. When was the last time any of you tested your weapon systems? Why would we? Asked Zalaneth. We haven't needed weapons for centuries. And your defense satellites? Jake continued. Your early warning systems? Your emergency response protocols? Admiral Morrison, Vexthara said, her voice taking on a sharper tone, you are beginning to sound like you want us to live in fear. I want you to live prepared, Jake replied. There's a difference. Is there? Tolvar asked. You maintain battle fleets, you train soldiers. You develop new weapons. Your species spends more on military preparation than some of our worlds spend on education. This is not the behavior of a peaceful people. Lisa Martinez stepped forward. Again, it's the behavior of a people who want to stay peaceful. On Earth we have a saying, if you want peace, prepare for war. How primitive, muttered Krimter. On my world we say, if you want peace, create beauty. Beauty doesn't stop bullets, Jake said quietly. What bullets? Vexthara's form flashed with irritation. Admiral Morrison, you speak of threats that exist only in your imagination. Perhaps your species should focus on evolving beyond these violent fantasies. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had heard this same message from every council meeting for the past 5 years. The galaxy had grown comfortable, soft. They had forgotten that the universe was vast and full of unknowns. Counselors, he said, I hope you're right. I hope. I'm wrong about everything. But if I'm not and something comes for us, we need to be ready. And if something comes for us, Fulver said, we will meet it with diplomacy, trade agreements, and cultural exchange. These tools have solved every problem for the past 300 years. What if diplomacy doesn't work? Lisa asked. What? If the next species we meet doesn't want to trade or exchange culture, what if they just want to take? Then we will find another way, Vexthara said firmly. We always have. Violence is never the answer. Violence is rarely the answer, Jake. Corrected. But sometimes it's the only question that matters. The council chamber fell silent. Jake could see the alien faces looking down at him with a mixture of disappointment and concern. To them, he was a relic from a more primitive time, a reminder of the dark ages when species solved problems by fighting. Admiral Morrison, Vexthara said finally, your request for increased defense spending is denied. Your proposal for mandatory military training is denied. Your suggestion for improved early warning systems is denied. The Coalition does not need these things because the Coalition does not expect war. But if war comes anyway, Jake asked, then we will face it as we have faced every challenge, Thulver said. Together, peacefully and with wisdom. Jake nodded slowly. He had expected this response, but it still hurt to hear it. I understand. Counselors, thank you for your time. As he turned to leave, Vexthara called out, Admiral Morrison, we hope that someday your species will learn to embrace the peace we have built instead of always preparing for its end. Jake paused at the chamber entrance. Counselor, I hope someday you'll understand that the only reason we have peace is because someone is always ready to fight for it. The chamber doors closed behind him with a soft whisper. Lisa Martinez walked beside him in silence until they reached their transport. Only then did she speak. They'll never listen, will they, Admiral? Jake looked out at the beautiful city around them. Towers of crystal and light reached toward the stars. Gardens floated in the air, filled with plants from a dozen worlds. It was paradise, built by a species who had forgotten that paradise always needed guardians. No, he said quietly. They won't listen, not until it's too late. Then what do we do? Jake straightened his uniform and looked up at the stars. "We do what humans have always done, Captain. We prepare for the war nobody wants to believe is coming." Lieutenant Commander Ryan Brooks stared at his screen for the third time in 10 minutes. The numbers didn't make sense. He rubbed his tired eyes and looked again, but the readings were still wrong. After 12 hours of routine patrol duty in the Kepler sector, this was the first interesting thing that had happened all week. "Chief, you need to see this," he called to Colonel Amy Carter, who was reviewing supply reports at the command station. Carter looked up from her tablet. She was a small woman with short brown hair and the kind of steady eyes that missed nothing. The UCS Vigilant was her ship, and she knew every sound it made, every light on every panel. When Brooks called her over, she could hear the worry in his voice. "What do you have, Ryan?" she asked, walking over to his monitoring station. "Energy readings near the Proxima relay," Brooks said, pointing at the screen. "They're faint, but they don't match anything in our database. Not Coalition tech, not any known species." Carter frowned as she studied the data. The readings were barely there, like whispers in the background noise of space. Most people would have missed them completely. But Brooks was good at his job, and he had learned to pay attention to things that didn't belong. "Could be equipment failure," Carter said, but she didn't sound convinced. "That's what I thought at first," Brooks replied. "But look at the pattern. These readings have been showing up for the past 6 hours, always in the same area, always with the same frequency." Carter felt a cold feeling in her stomach. In her 15 years of military service, she had learned to trust her instincts. Right now, those instincts were telling her that something was very wrong. "Send a coded message to Fleet Command," she ordered. "Mark it Priority 1. Include all the sensor data from the past 12 hours. "Yes, ma'am." Brooks began typing quickly. On his console, 3 hours later, similar readings appeared near the Vega relay station. Then the Centauri station. Then Alpha Prime. Each time, the energy signatures were faint and brief, like someone was testing the galaxy's communications network on the other side of Coalition space. The great city of Concordia sparkled under the light of 3 suns. The capital world was home to the most beautiful architecture in the galaxy. Crystal towers reached toward the clouds, connected by bridges that seemed to be made of solid light. Gardens floated in the air, filled with plants and flowers from every world. In the Coalition dot in the center of the city, the council building rose like a mountain of pure diamond. Inside, representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss trade routes, cultural exchanges, and art projects. War was the furthest thing from their minds. Ambassador Zalaneth, the Etherian diplomat, was presenting a proposal for new shipping lanes when his aide approached with a message tablet. "Honored Ambassador," the aide whispered, "we have reports of technical difficulties with several relay stations." Zalaneth barely glanced at the tablet. "Handle it through the usual channels. I'm sure it's nothing serious." At the same moment, the Voltheran Minister of Communications was fielding similar reports. 3 relay stations had gone offline in the past hour, but the minister wasn't worried. Technical problems happened all the time. The galaxy's communication network was vast and complex, and equipment failed regularly. "Schedule maintenance crews for next week," the minister told his staff. "These old relay stations need constant attention." But aboard the Vigilant, Colonel? Carter was tracking a pattern that no one else seemed to notice. The relay stations weren't just failing randomly. They were being shut down in a specific order, creating a corridor of silence through Coalition space. "Ma'am," Brooks called out, "we've lost contact with the Proxima relay entirely." No response on any frequency. Carter walked over to the main display screen, which showed a map of the local sector. Red dots marked the locations of failed relay stations. When she connected them with lines, they formed a clear path through space. "They're not random failures," she said quietly. "Someone is cutting our communication lines." Dr. Sam Peterson, the ship's science officer, looked up from his research station. He was a thin man with thick glasses who preferred studying star formations to thinking about military threats. But even he could see the pattern on the display. "Colonel," he said, Whoever is doing this understands our network better than we do. They're not just cutting communications. They're studying our protocols, learning how our systems work. Carter nodded grimly. She had been afraid of something like this. The Coalition's communication network was built for convenience, not security. Every relay station used the same codes, the same frequencies, the same basic design. If someone wanted to take down the entire network, they would know exactly how to do it. How long before they reached the core systems? She asked. Peterson ran some quick calculations on his computer. At their current rate, maybe 2 weeks. But that's assuming they keep moving at the same speed. They won't, Carter said. They'll speed up once they've learned what they need. To know, she turned to Brooks. Send another message to Fleet Command. Tell them we have a hostile force moving through Coalition space. Unknown technology, unknown intentions, but definitely hostile. Ma'am, should I also contact the local Coalition authorities? Brooks asked. Carter thought about it for a moment. The Coalition authorities would want to send diplomats. They would want to try negotiating? They would waste precious time trying to communicate with an enemy that clearly didn't want to talk. Negative, she said. Send it straight to Admiral Morrison. He'll know what to do. On Concordia, the day continued peacefully. The council members debated the finest details of cultural exchange programs. Artists from different worlds shared their latest creations. Scientists presented papers on theoretical physics and advanced mathematics. No one talked about war because war was impossible. The Cronin representative, Thulver, was enjoying a lunch of crystallized minerals when his communication device chimed. A message from one of the outer colonies reported that they had lost contact with their neighboring system. Thulver barely glanced at the message before filing it away. Communication problems were common in the outer colonies. Meanwhile, the Zephyrian Council of Vexthara was reviewing proposals for a new art installation that would span 3-star systems. The project would take 50 years to complete and would be visible from space. She was so focused on the beautiful designs that she didn't notice the report about missing trade ships near the rim worlds. Back on the Vigilant, Carter was studying the enemy's movements with growing concern. The pattern was becoming clearer. The hostile force was moving through space like a disease, cutting communications and isolating star systems. They were being very careful, very methodical. They're preparing for something big, she told Peterson. This isn't random destruction. This is preparation. Preparation for what? Peterson asked. Invasion, Carter said simply. They're cutting our ability to call for help, to coordinate defenses, to warn each other. When they're ready to attack, we won't be able to fight back. Effectively, she walked back to the command station and opened a secure channel to Earth. The message would take hours to reach Admiral Morrison, but she had to try. Admiral Morrison, she said into the recorder, this is Colonel Carter aboard the Vigilant. We have confirmed hostile activity in the Kepler sector. Unknown force is systematically destroying our communication network. Pattern suggests preparation for large-scale assault. Request immediate backup and permission to engage. She paused, then added, Sir, I think the war you've been preparing for just started. After sending the message, Carter ordered her crew to battle stations. The Vigilant was just one small ship, but it was a human ship, built for war and crewed by people who understood what war meant. Ma'am, Brooks called out, I'm detecting movement near the Altair relay. Multiple contacts, moving fast. Carter looked at the display. The enemy was no longer being subtle. They were moving openly now, confident that no one could stop them. All stop, she ordered. Silent running. We're going to watch and learn. The Vigilant drifted silently through space. As the enemy force approached the Altair relay, through their sensors, Carter and her crew got their first look at the ships that were hunting them. The vessels were unlike anything in Coalition databases. They were huge, dark, and seemed to be made of some kind of living metal. They moved, with a purpose that was both alien and terrifying. My God, Peterson whispered. What are those things? Carter watched as the enemy ships surrounded the relay station. There was no warning, no attempt at communication. The station simply disappeared, consumed by some kind of energy field that the sensors couldn't analyze. They're not just destroying the relays, Carter said quietly. They're harvesting them. The enemy ships moved on, leaving nothing behind but empty space. The Altair relay, which had served the Coalition for 200 years, was gone as if it had never existed. Set course for the nearest Coalition base, Carter ordered. Best possible speed. Ma'am, Brooks said, that will take us away from the enemy fleet. Shouldn't we keep tracking them? No, Carter replied. We've seen enough. Now we need to warn everyone we can before the communication network fails completely. As the Vigilant jumped to hyperspace, Carter thought about the council meeting where Admiral Morrison had been laughed at just 3 months ago. The galaxy had mocked humanity's fear of war. Captain Nicole Davis was drinking her morning coffee when the emergency alert came through. The sharp sound of the battle alarm cut through the quiet of the UCS Rangers Bridge, making her spill hot coffee on her uniform. Captain to the bridge. Emergency priority, came the voice over the ship's speakers. Davis ran through the corridors of her ship, still wiping coffee from her jacket. The Ranger was one of the newer human patrol cruisers, fast and well-armed, though small compared to the massive Coalition ships. She had been commanding it for 3 years, and her crew trusted her completely when she reached the bridge. Communications Officer Tony Walsh was already at his station, his face pale as he listened to something through his headset. What do? We have, Tony, Davis asked, sliding into her captain's chair. Distress call from Haven's Rest, Walsh replied, his voice shaking slightly. Captain, you need to hear this. Davis put on her own headset and listened to the transmission. At first there was only static and screaming. Then a voice came through, broken and desperate. This is Governor Martin Cross of Haven's Rest. We are under attack. Unknown ships are in orbit. They're not responding to any communication. They're taking our people. Please, anyone who can hear this, help us. They're harvesting everything. The mining stations, the orbital platforms, even the people. Oh God, they're taking the children too. The transmission cut off in a burst of static. Davis felt her blood turn cold. Haven's Rest was a peaceful mining world with 3 million people. Families, workers, children who had never seen war. She had visited there once and remembered the beautiful crystal formations that made the planet famous across the galaxy. How long ago was this transmitted? She asked. 18 minutes, Walsh replied. It's been repeating every few minutes, but it's getting weaker. Navigator Sarah Kim looked up from her station. Captain, Haven's Rest is only 4 hours away at maximum. Burn. We could be there before noon, Davis nodded. Set course immediately. Maximum speed. Ma'am, Walsh said quietly, we're just one ship. If there's an entire enemy fleet there, then we'll do what we can, Davis replied. Alert all Coalition forces in the sector. Tell them we have a humanitarian crisis at Haven's Rest. As the Ranger jumped to hyperspace, Davis thought about what she had heard in the transmission. The governor had said the attackers were harvesting people. Not killing them, not capturing them, harvesting them. The word made her stomach turn. Doctor Ellen Foster, the ship's medical officer, joined them on the bridge. She was a small woman with gray hair who had seen too much suffering in her 40 years of service. Captain, she said, I've been monitoring Coalition medical frequencies. There are reports of missing ships near the rim worlds. Transport vessels, cargo haulers, even a passenger liner. They all disappeared without sending distress calls? How many people? Davis asked. Nearly 50,000 spread across 20. Ships, Foster replied, all gone in the past 2 weeks. Davis felt a chill run down her spine. 50,000 people didn't just disappear. Someone was taking them, and now they were attacking populated worlds. Time to Haven's Rest? She called. Out. 3 hours, 40 minutes, Kim replied. The next 3 hours passed slowly. Davis paced the bridge, checking and rechecking their weapon systems. The Ranger carried missiles, plasma cannons, and defensive screens, but it was designed for patrol work, not major battles. Captain, Walsh said, I'm trying to raise Haven's Rest on all frequencies. No response. Keep trying, Davis ordered. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Haven's Rest system, what they saw made the entire bridge crew fall silent. The planet was still there, but it was wrong. The beautiful blue and white world that Davis remembered was now a sickly gray color. The orbital stations that had processed the planet's crystal exports were gone. In their place were massive ships unlike anything in Coalition databases. My God, whispered Kim, what are those things? The enemy ships were huge, easily 10 times the size of the Ranger. They looked like they were made of living metal, with organic curves and mechanical parts that seemed to grow and change as they watched. Dark energy flowed between them like blood through veins. Scanning the lead ship, reported Science Officer Dr. Marcus Webb. Captain, these readings don't make sense. The ship appears to be partially organic, partially mechanical. It's like it's alive. Davis stared at the display screen. How many ships? 12 large vessels plus dozens of smaller ones, Webb replied. They're surrounding the planet like they're feeding on it. Feeding on it? Look at the planet's surface, Webb said, adjusting the display. Davis looked and felt sick. The planet's surface was covered with huge machines that seemed to be eating the ground itself. The beautiful crystal formations were being consumed, processed, and fed into the alien ships. Even worse, she could see streams of people being moved from the surface to the ships like a steady flow of food. They're harvesting the entire planet, Kim said quietly. The minerals, the structures, the people. Everything. Captain, Walsh called out, one of the alien ships is moving toward us. Davis looked at the tactical display. One of the smaller enemy ships, still twice the size of the Ranger, was breaking away from the group and heading in their direction. Battle stations, she ordered. All hands prepare for combat. The bridge lights dimmed as the ship's systems shifted to combat mode. Davis felt the familiar tension that came before a fight. She had trained for this moment her entire career, but she had never expected to face an enemy like this. Captain, Webb said, I'm detecting some kind of scanning beam from the approaching ship. They're studying us. Are they trying to communicate? No. This is different. It's like they're tasting us. Davis felt her skin crawl. Can we outrun them? Not likely, Kim replied. Their ship is faster than ours. Then we fight, Davis said. Target their engines. Fire when ready. The Ranger's plasma cannons fired, sending bright bolts of energy toward the enemy ship. The shots hit their target, but instead of exploding, they were absorbed by the alien. Vessel's hull, direct hit, no damage, Webb reported. Captain, our weapons aren't hurting them. Try the missiles, Davis ordered. A spread of missiles launched from the Ranger and streaked toward the enemy ship. This time, the alien vessel responded. Dark energy beams shot out and destroyed the missiles before they could reach their target. Captain, Walsh said, they're not trying to destroy us. They're playing with us. Davis realized he was right. The enemy ship could have destroyed them easily, but instead it was circling them like a predator studying its prey. All stop, she ordered. If they want to study us, let's study them too. For several minutes, the two ships faced each other in space. The alien vessel was beautiful in a terrifying way, its living metal surface shifting and changing as they watched. Davis could see openings in its hull that looked like mouths, and she realized with horror that the ship was designed to consume other vessels. Captain, Webb said quietly, I'm detecting human life signs aboard that ship. Thousands of them. The people from Haven's Rest? I think so. They're alive, but changed somehow. Their biosignatures are different. Davis felt rage building in her chest. These creatures had taken innocent people and were doing something horrible to them. She thought about the children Governor Cross had mentioned, and her anger grew hotter. Tony, she said, open a channel to the enemy ship. Oh. Frequencies. Channel open, Captain. Davis stood up and spoke clearly into the microphone. This is Captain Nicole Davis of the Coalition vessel UCS Ranger. You are attacking innocent civilians. Cease your operations immediately and return the people you have taken. There was no response. I repeat, you are committing acts of war against peaceful populations. Respond immediately. Still nothing. Captain, Webb said, I don't think they understand the concept of communication, or surrender, or negotiation. Davis stared at the alien ship. What do they understand? Hunger, Webb replied. They understand hunger. The enemy ship suddenly moved closer, and Davis could see more details of its horrible design. The hull was covered with what looked like digestive chambers. Inside them, she could see pieces of the orbital stations that had been consumed, along with equipment and materials that were being broken down and absorbed. They're not conquerors, she said quietly. They're parasites. Captain, Walsh called. Out. Multiple contacts approaching. The rest of their fleet is coming for us. Davis looked at the tactical display. All 12 of the massive enemy ships were moving toward them, along with dozens of smaller vessels. They had no chance of fighting them all. Kim, plot a course out of the system. Emergency jump, she ordered. Course plotted, Captain. Wait, Davis said. She looked at the planet below, knowing that 3 million people were being processed by the alien machines. Tony, start recording everything. Full spectrum analysis. I want complete data on these ships and their technology. Recording started, Captain. And send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we've found the enemy. Tell them they don't negotiate, they don't communicate, and they don't stop. They just consume. The enemy ships were getting closer. Davis could see energy building in their weapons systems. Jump now, she ordered. The Ranger disappeared into hyperspace just as the enemy weapons fired. Energy beams passed through the space where they had been powerful enough. The emergency session of the Galactic Council began at dawn on Concordia. For the first time in 300 years, every representative was present. The beautiful crystal chamber that usually echoed with laughter and peaceful debate now hummed. With fear and confusion, Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the center of the chamber, but this time no one was laughing. The holographic display behind him showed the recording from Captain Davis's encounter at Haven's Rest. The images were horrifying. Massive biomechanical ships consumed an entire planet while streams of people were fed into their digestive chambers. Hi. Counselor Vexthara's crystal form flickered with distress. Her usual bright colors had dimmed to a pale, sickly glow. Admiral Morrison, are you certain this recording is authentic? Yes, Counselor, Morrison replied. We've confirmed it through multiple sources. The enemy has taken 17 star systems. In the past week, each time they leave nothing behind. No survivors, no structures, nothing. Commander Thulver, the massive Kronan representative, leaned forward on his floating platform. His voice, usually booming with confidence, now carried a tremor of fear. What are these creatures? Where did they come from? Colonel Janet Miller, Morrison's strategic advisor, stepped forward with a data tablet. She was a thin woman with sharp eyes who had spent her career studying military threats that everyone else ignored. We call them the Zirathi, she said. Based on our analysis, they're not from this galaxy. They appear to be some kind of biomechanical civilization that consumes other worlds to fuel their expansion. Biomechanical? Asked Ambassador Zalaneth, his ghostly form wavering with uncertainty. Part living tissue, part machine, Miller explained. Their ships grow and adapt. They don't just use technology, they become it. Every world they consume makes them stronger and smarter. Dr. Kevin Roberts, Earth's representative to the Council, activated another holographic display. It showed a map of coalition space with red zones marking the areas the Zirathi had already consumed. They're moving systematically through our territory, he said. Not randomly, but with clear strategy. They're cutting off our communication lines, isolating our worlds, and preventing coordinated defense. Counselor Krimter, the tree-like being with 4 arms, spoke in a voice like rustling leaves. Surely there must be some way to communicate with them. Every species can be reasoned with. Morrison shook his head. Captain Davis tried every form of communication we know. The Zirathi don't respond to radio signals, mathematical sequences, or even direct telepathic contact. They don't seem to understand the concept of communication at all. Then what do they want? Vexthara asked. Everything, Morrison said simply. They want every planet, every resource, every living being. They're not conquerors who will rule over us. They're parasites who will consume us. The chamber fell silent as the representatives absorbed this information. For 300 years, they had solved every problem through diplomacy and trade. The idea of an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with was beyond their understanding. What about our defensive fleets? Thulvar asked. Surely our combined forces can stop them. Miller activated another display showing coalition military assets. The numbers were not encouraging. The coalition has 47 major warships spread across 500 star systems, she said. Most haven't seen combat in over a century. Their weapons are outdated, their crews are untrained, and their commanders have never fought a real battle. And the Zirathi? Zalaneth asked quietly. Based on our observations, they have at least 300 major vessels, with more arriving every day. Each ship is larger and more powerful than anything in our fleet. Worse, they're learning from every encounter. They adapt faster than we can. Dr. Roberts stepped forward. Counselors, we need to face the truth. The galaxy's age of peace is over. We're at war whether we want to be or not. But we don't know how to fight wars anymore. Vexthara said, her crystal form flickering with despair. Our people are artists, scientists, philosophers. They're not soldiers. Morrison looked around the chamber at the faces of species who had grown soft during centuries of peace. That's why you need us? Need you? Thulvar asked. Humanity, Morrison said. We're the only species that maintained a real military. While you built art galleries, we built weapons. While you composed songs, we trained soldiers. While you forgot how to fight, we never stopped preparing for war. Colonel Miller activated a new display showing human military assets. The contrast with coalition forces was stark. Earth maintains 130 battle-ready warships, she said. Our crews train constantly for combat scenarios. Our weapons are designed for war, not ceremony. Our commanders have studied every military conflict in galactic history. But humanity has only been part of the coalition for 50 years, Krimter protested. How can you have more military strength than civilizations that have existed for millennia? Because we never stopped believing that war was possible, Morrison replied. You called us primitive for preparing for threats that didn't exist. But we knew that somewhere in the darkness of space, something was waiting. Robert stepped forward again. Counselors were offering to lead the defense of the galaxy. But you need to understand what that means. War isn't pretty. It's not diplomatic. It requires sacrifices that peaceful species find difficult to accept. What kind of sacrifices? Vexthara asked. Total mobilization, Morrison said. Every world. Every resource, every ship turned toward the war effort. No more art projects, no more philosophy debates, no more cultural exchanges, just survival. You're asking us to abandon everything that makes our civilization beautiful, Zalaneth said. I'm asking you to stay alive long enough to rebuild it. Morrison replied, The Zirathi don't care about your art or your philosophy, they just see food. Thulvar stood up on his platform, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. Admiral Morrison, if we agree to this, what assurance do we have that humanity won't use this crisis to seize control of the coalition? Morrison looked at the Kronan representative with steady eyes. Because if we lose this war, there won't be a coalition left to control. The Zirathi don't leave survivors, and they don't take prisoners. They consume everything. Dr. Roberts activated a final display showing projected casualty numbers. The figures were staggering. Current estimates suggest the Zirathi will reach the core worlds within 6 months, he said. If we maintain our current defensive posture, we project total galactic consumption within 2 years. That's 50 billion lives across 300 worlds. And if we follow human military doctrine? Vexthara asked. We might have a chance, Morrison said. Not a guarantee, but a chance. The Zirathi are powerful, but they're not invincible. They can be fought, they can be hurt, and they can be stopped. But only if we fight them the right way. Miller stepped forward. We're not asking you to become warriors overnight. We're asking you to trust the people who never stopped being warriors. Let us plan the battles, coordinate the defenses, and make the hard decisions that peaceful civilizations can't make. What would you need from us? Krimter asked. Everything, Morrison said. Every ship converted to military use. Every factory retooled to build weapons, every citizen trained for defense. This war will require every resource the galaxy can provide. And command structure? Thulver asked. Unified command under human leadership, Morrison replied. I know that's difficult to accept, but war requires quick decisions and clear authority. Committees and debates get people killed. The representatives looked at each other with expressions of fear and uncertainty. They were being asked to abandon 300 years of peaceful tradition and trust their survival to the species they had mocked as primitive. Admiral Morrison, Vexthara said finally, 3 months ago, we laughed at your warnings about military threats. We called humanity warmongers and primitives. Now you're offering to save us. Because that's what humans do, Morrison replied. We protect the people who can't protect themselves, even when they don't appreciate it. And after the war? Zalaneth asked. What happens when the threat is gone? Morrison was quiet for a moment. If we survive, we'll rebuild. The galaxy will be beautiful again, full of art and music and philosophy. But it will also be defended. Someone will always stand watch, ready for the next threat that comes from the darkness. Because peace isn't the absence of war, Dr. Roberts added. Peace is what happens when good people are willing to fight for it. The chamber fell silent as the representatives considered their choice. They could maintain their peaceful traditions and face extinction, or they could trust the warriors they had despised and have a chance at survival. All in favor of granting emergency military authority to Admiral Morrison and the human fleet? Vexthara asked. One by one, every representative raised their hand or tentacle or pseudopod in agreement. The decision was unanimous. Morrison nodded grimly. Thank you, counselors. I wish we had more time to prepare, but the Zirathi won't wait. As of this moment, the coalition is under martial law. Every world, every ship, every resource is now part of the war effort. He paused, looking around the chamber at the faces of species who had just given up everything they believed in to survive. We'll do everything we can to save your worlds and your people, he said. But understand this, the galaxy. The battle for Arcturus Station began at 0600 hours on a Tuesday morning. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UCS Defiant, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history moved into position. 200 ships from 30 different worlds, all following orders from human commanders for the first time in Coalition history. Zirathi fleet detected on long-range sensors, reported Tactical Officer Brandon Lee. 73 harvester ships, 12 dreadnoughts, and 1 massive vessel we haven't seen before. Morrison studied the tactical display. The enemy fleet was exactly where his intelligence reports had predicted they would be. The Zirathi moved in patterns, following the same consumption routes across every galaxy they had invaded. Humanity had spent 3 weeks learning those patterns. Size estimate on the unknown vessel? Morrison asked. 15 kilometers long, sir, Lee replied. It's 3 times larger than anything we've encountered. Captain Kevin Murphy, commanding the assault destroyer UCS Thunder, spoke over the communications link. Admiral, my scouts report the big ship is some kind of mobile factory. It's building more Zirathi vessels as we watch. Morrison nodded grimly. That explained how the Zirathi fleet kept growing despite their losses. They weren't just consuming worlds for food. They were turning the raw materials into more ships, more weapons, more soldiers. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison, he announced over the fleet-wide channel. Today we make our stand. The enemy has consumed 17 of our worlds and killed millions of our people. They think we're just another meal to be harvested. They're wrong. Commander Lisa Rodriguez, leading the fighter squadrons, checked her weapons one final time. Around her, 200 of the galaxy's best pilots prepared for the most important battle of their lives. Half of them were human, but the other half came from species that had never fired a shot in anger. "Squadron leaders, sound off," Rodriguez called. "Zephyrian wing ready," came the crystalline voice of Flight Leader Zendel. His transparent fighter glowed with inner light as his people prepared to fight for the first time in centuries. "Cronin squadron ready," boomed Wing Commander Grulthok. The massive stone-like beings had built fighters that looked more like flying fortresses. "Etherian flight ready," whispered Flight Captain Velmora. The ghost-like beings had surprised everyone by becoming excellent pilots, their ability to think in multiple dimensions giving them an edge in space combat. Morrison smiled slightly. 3 weeks ago, these species had been artists and philosophers. Now they were warriors, united by the simple desire to survive. "All fighters, begin your attack runs," Morrison ordered. "Target the harvester ships first. We need to stop them from feeding." The fighter squadrons streaked toward the Zirathi fleet like deadly meteors. Rodriguez led the charge, her human-designed fighter cutting through space with lethal precision. Behind her, the alien pilots followed tactics they had learned from human instructors. "First wave, concentrate fire on the lead harvester," Rodriguez commanded. "Show them what happens when you threaten our homes." The combined firepower of 200 fighters struck the Zirathi harvester like a hammer blow. For the first time in the war, the enemy ship took real damage. Its biomechanical hull cracked and leaked dark fluid into space. "Direct hit," reported Flight Leader Zendel, his excitement making his crystal form glow brighter. "The creature is wounded." But the Zirathi fleet was already responding. Dark energy beams lashed out from the alien ships, destroying 3 fighters in the first volley. The enemy was learning, adapting their tactics to counter the unexpected resistance. "All ships, advance to engagement range," Morrison ordered. "Execute Battle Plan Omega." The coalition fleet moved forward in perfect formation. Human commanders had spent weeks training alien crews in military tactics. Ships that had been built for exploration and trade now bristled with weapons designed for war. Captain Janet Foster, commanding the converted Zephyrian art vessel Crystal Song, opened fire with plasma cannons that had been installed just days before. "This is for Haven's Rest," she said quietly as her shots struck an enemy destroyer. The Zirathi responded with their own weapons, biomechanical cannons that fired living projectiles. The organic ammunition struck coalition shields and began eating through them like acid. "Shields at 60%, reported Chief Engineer Paul Adams aboard the Defiant. "These biological weapons are adapting to our defenses." "Then we adapt faster," Morrison replied. All ships switched to kinetic weapons, hit them with solid projectiles. The human ships opened fire with railguns and missile systems, sending metal slugs and explosive warheads into the enemy fleet. The Zirathi had no defense against simple physics. Solid metal traveling at incredible speed punched through their biomechanical hulls. "Target the big one," Morrison ordered, pointing at the massive factory ship. "If we can stop them from building more vessels, we can win this." The UCS Defiant led a group of heavy cruisers toward the enemy factory ship. As they approached, Morrison could see the horrible details of its construction. The ship was like a living city with organic corridors and mechanical assembly lines working together to create new Zirathi vessels. "My God," whispered Science Officer Dr. Rachel Green. "It's using the people from the consumed worlds as raw material." "They're part of the ship now?" Morrison felt sick, but he pushed the feeling aside. War required hard choices and cold calculation. "All ships, concentrate fire on the factory's core. We end this now." The coalition fleet unleashed everything they had at the massive enemy ship. Plasma beams, kinetic projectiles, and fusion torpedoes struck the factory from every direction. The biomechanical structure began to buckle and tear, but the factory ship fought back. Massive tentacles emerged from its hull, reaching out to grab coalition vessels. One tentacle wrapped around the Cronin cruiser Stoneheart, and Morrison watched in horror as the enemy ship began to consume it. "Stoneheart, eject your crew and detonate your reactor," Morrison ordered. "Understood, Admiral," came the voice of Captain Thulgrim. It has been an honor to fight alongside humans. Tell our people we died as warriors. The Stoneheart exploded in a brilliant flash, taking a section of the factory ship with it. The sacrifice opened a gap in the enemy's defenses. All fighters, attack through the breach, Rodriguez commanded. Make their sacrifice count. The surviving fighters dove through the opening, striking at the factory ship's vital systems. Explosions bloomed across its surface as ammunition stores and fuel tanks detonated. Lieutenant Commander Steve Adams, piloting a single-man fighter, made the final attack run. "This is for everyone we've lost," he said as he flew his ship directly into the factory's core. The explosion that followed lit up the entire star system. The massive factory ship broke apart, its biomechanical components screaming as they died. Smaller Zirathi vessels that had been connected to it also perished, their life support systems failing. "Enemy fleet is breaking up," reported Brandon. "Lee, the remaining ships are retreating." Morrison watched as the surviving Zirathi vessels fled toward the edge of the system. For the first time since the war began, the enemy was running away. "All ships report status," he ordered. The reports came in slowly. The coalition had lost 47 ships and nearly 10,000 people, but they had destroyed an entire Zirathi fleet and stopped the enemy advance. "Admiral," came the voice of Captain Davis over the communication system. "This is the UCS Ranger. We're tracking the retreating enemy ships. They're heading back toward the galactic rim." Morrison nodded. "Let 'em go. We've sent a message they won't forget." 6 months later, the Galactic Council met again in their rebuilt chamber. The crystal walls now incorporated defensive systems and weapons batteries. Beautiful art still decorated the space, but it shared room with tactical displays and military equipment. Admiral Morrison, now bearing the title Supreme Commander of Coalition Defense Forces, stood before the assembled representatives. His uniform showed the signs of months of warfare, and his face carried new lines of stress and responsibility. "The Zirathi have been pushed back to the galactic rim," he reported. "Our combined forces have established a defensive perimeter that should hold for the foreseeable future." High Counselor Vextara, her crystal form now bearing battle scars, spoke with genuine humility. "Supreme Commander Morrison, the Coalition owes humanity a debt we can never repay. We mocked your preparations for war, but you were preparing to save us all." Morrison looked out at the faces of species who had learned hard lessons about the nature of peace and war. "We didn't prepare for war because we wanted it. We prepared because we understood that peace is something you have to fight for." Dr. Patricia Clark, now serving as humanity's permanent ambassador, stepped forward. "The galaxy is beautiful again, but it's also defended. We've learned that art and philosophy are precious things that require protection. And what of the future?" asked Fulver, the Cronan representative who had lost his son in the battle for Arcturus Station. "What happens when the next threat comes?" Morrison smiled slightly. "Then we'll be ready. All of us. The galaxy has learned that peace isn't the absence of war. Peace is what happens when good people are willing to fight for it." Ambassador Zalaneth, his ghostly form flickering with newfound resolve, spoke for all the coalition species. "We will not forget this lesson."